Hello, everybody. This is Kevin Hancock with Exostar. We're going to start the webinar in just about 2 minutes, so please sit tight. Just want to give everyone a chance to go ahead and join up. Okay, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Kevin Hancock. I'm with Exostar. I'm the Director of Sales Engineering here at Exostar. And thanks for coming to today's webinar, CMMC 2.0, what your prime expects and how to get there. Before we get started, I just want to cover a few housekeeping details. So today's webinar is scheduled to last 45 minutes to an hour. That'll include a Q&A session, which includes the questions that were submitted prior to the start. There is a large portion of today's webinar that will be spent answering those questions. As I mentioned before, these were taken from the ones that were submitted prior to the webinar. Today's broadcast, if for some reason you lose the connection, and this really hasn't happened, just go ahead and wait a minute and then just refresh your page and it should restart. For your convenience, there's a link in the YouTube description to a glossary of commonly used terms. We all understand that in this business, there are a number of different acronyms and other terms. So this will help you follow along if you're fairly new. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on demand via the Exostar resource library. That's available from our website at www.exostar.com/resources. After the event, the YouTube link that you used to get here will also be available as well to replay the event for yourself. If you'd like to speak with one of our industry experts, please request a copy of this slide deck. Please go ahead and reach out to us at cmmc-team@exostar.com. Also, if you go to our website, there is a live chat feature at www.exostar.com, and you can ask any questions on there as well. We do have a special offer for all the attendees of this webinar at the end of the event, so please stay tuned to hear about that exciting offer. So I'm happy to be joined on today's webinar, and this will be very much in the form of a panel discussion, if you will, by two industry leads or experts, if you will. First, and I'm going to throw the guys a curve here a little bit, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So first, we're joined by Sam Salinas with Raytheon Technologies. Sam, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kevin. Sam Salinas, again, from RTX. I have the pleasure of leading enterprise-wide compliance for the company.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Sam. We're also joined by Tim Brennan. Tim, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tim Brennan. I'm CEO of SysArc. We're an MSP that's been helping DIB suppliers with DFARS and CMMC compliance for the last 5+ years. And look forward to speaking with you all today.
Great. Thanks so much, Tim. So this is the agenda we'll cover today. We'll have Sam and Tim both present a small portion. The topics they're going to cover are the ones you see here. What are those expectations direct from a prime? What's required today? That is always a big question that we have out there. What's really at stake for the suppliers if you don't comply? And how best can SMBs meet those requirements faster, obviously without breaking the bank? And then, as I mentioned before, we'll go ahead with a Q&A session as well. So before I bring on Sam, I want to just kind of reset everybody and go over kind of what is where are we at today? So for today, right, the requirement is really NIST 800-171. That is the requirement that we have today. There's the DFARS clauses that govern, the self-assessments, the SPRS score reporting, etc. And there was a recent announcement about CMMC, and the recent announcement in particular about CMMC 2.0. Now, the good news, if you will, for this community is that CMMC 2.0 is not going to really require things in addition to NIST. It was announced that it is going to be based on the NIST 800-171 control families, that those groups involved with CMMC will work with NIST if additional controls are needed, but that's to be expected with any standards. And CMMC itself really won't take effect until somewhere between 9 and 24 months down the pipe. So obviously still, keep abreast of that and understand that's coming. But today, these are really the areas to focus on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam to let us know what's going on from RTX's point of view.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. So what is it that we expect, right, from a prime's perspective? It's a good question. So I'm going to hit 3 main points, and it's really quite simple. So one is you keep going, right? The threat environment isn't getting any less complex than ever before, right? It's only getting more complex. It's only getting harder. So as this slide right here says, today's law of the land, 70-12, 19-20, right? Keep going, right? If you haven't read a recent threat report from Microsoft about Novellum, please read that, right? If you haven't read the latest mandate report that came out this past Monday, you need to get your hands on those reports, right? But again, keep going, right? Today's law of the land is 70-12. Maintain that compliance, improve it over time. In relation to CMMC 1.0 versus 2.0, do a quick vector check, right? I hope that you were working on CMMC 1.0. Now it's a good time to do a check, right? See where you are and where you might need to adjust for 2.0, right? Again, keep going, right? Keep moving forward, keep making progress to improve your cyber hygiene throughout the company. Second point, this is a team sport. Again, partner, you need to communicate and share information with your peers, with your primes, across the board, right? Keep communicating and sharing information. The threat actors out there want us not to communicate, but we need to keep communicating because those that want us to fail don't want us talking. Pretty simple. And the last point, and you're here today, so you're involved in the community, continue to engage in the community. Engage in industry associations, government programs, DIB-CS program, or the NDISAC. Get involved, know what's going on with the compliance across the board, and start volunteering. And those that's pretty much what we're expecting as primes. Reach out to your prime as well. I want to hear from you if you're in our supply chain. So please reach out and communicate.
Well, Sam, thanks so much. And that really is a key to any of these things, right? It is reach out to your primes if you have a question. Communicate with them what you're doing, what any questions you have, and if you will, and stay tuned. So next we're going to bring up Tim, and Tim, as we mentioned before, CEO of SysArc, one of the an MSP provider in this space. So Tim, I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to touch on a few things and add to what Sam had mentioned. We help a lot of those suppliers, some of whom are suppliers to Raytheon and other larger primes, and we've consulted with over 700 in the last 5 years, and about 150 of them become customers where we've helped with assessments and remediation. So what we're telling our customers after explaining what 2.0 is again, it's the same sort of concept, which is, you need to keep on going down the, especially if you have CUI, you need to go down the DFAR 7012 route. But for those folks who are looking at CMMC 2.0, on level 1, right, they basically gave a pass to the majority of the DIB suppliers. They wouldn't have to spend the money to get audited, right? That's probably, if the estimates are correct, there's 300,000 or so DIB suppliers. 250,000 of those were going to fall into level 1. So they basically, gave that group, the costs associated with getting an audit, were significant, and so they let them, take a pass on that. But our advice is, the threat hasn't gone away, and if you have a company in that level that's of any size, you have assets, you have your own intellectual property, the threat of ransomware is really inherent in a lot of these smaller companies and companies that may not need to protect the DoD's data, but you have your own things to protect. We're seeing more and more ransomware shut down companies, right? So our advice is maybe take the money you might have had to spend on those audits and invest it in good cyber hygiene. Level 1 with CMMC 1.0 was very, very basic cyber hygiene. It's almost non-existent. That standard was developed 5 years ago, right? So the 17 controls in level 1 of CMMC are just so basic. We feel like as practitioners, and we're trying to help customers, any kind of customers, be more secure. Our advice is get to NIST 800-171 compliance, and your organizations can be much more secure. You'll be able to reach level 2 and CMMC 2.0 right away. You'll be more competitive to your primes if you've got your organization more secure. So that's our advice. It's I understand the economics of it, but you business owners can make up your minds on that. But and then if you move up to CMMC 2.0 level 2, that's suppliers handling CUI that already fall under DFAR 7012, right? So you should normally already be there, right? And we know that a lot aren't, and some have made progress. And again, it's continue down that road. The DoD is going to continue to do those random audits that were set up in DFAR 7012, 7020, 19 and 20 last year, and they've been doing those audits. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we've seen come out of that. So again, our advice is if you handle CUI, you already need to be down that road, and you'll be right there to be able to be audited on level 2 when the time comes. And then CMMC 2.0 level 3, again, that's maybe 5%, or less, according to DoD, of suppliers will fall under that category. And if you're in that category, you know who you are already, and you're probably already very secure, and you've gone down this path. So the majority of people we talk to are the ones that are handling CUI and would normally need to be at CMMC level 2. So the question we get asked by a lot of people is, how do we get started, right? And again, if you're handling CUI and you're trying to get to level 2, you need to be at DFAR 7012. It starts with the NIST 800-171 assessment / gap analysis. And out of that comes an SSP, a POAM, and SPRS score that was laid out last November in the interim rule. And we use Certification Assistant with a lot of our customers. It's a great tool. And we see a lot of other folks that are using this tool that try to do it on their own. And a lot of companies do get stuck while trying to do this, because if they don't have an expert who understands the 110 controls and how to interpret them, it's hard to do a good job with filling out that assessment properly and getting the right sort of results out of that. So that's what SysArc does. We've helped 150 or more customers complete their assessments, and that's really step one. That gives you the roadmap of where you are and where you need to get to, and in what time frame, right? So the Certification Assistant's got a lot of functionality and features in it, including the ability to sort of track your progress along the way, and put in evidence that eventually you'll need when you get audited. So it's a really full-featured tool that we like and use a lot. And then for us, the next step after that, right, is really work on completing your POAM, which is what the DoD is asking everybody to do, what your primes are asking you to do. And a lot of people are sort of stopping after the assessment and just sort of letting the POAM sit there, right? Others who are more proactive are going down this path, either on their own or using outside companies like SysArc or other RPOs that you can find on the CMMC AB website. I think there's about 500 or so consulting companies like ours that are doing this work. And then I don't know if anybody was on the call, the Exostar webinar a few weeks ago, but John Ellis was on there. He did a great job of explaining what companies can do now and what they've seen in some of the audits that they've done at DCMA. But I just want to outline some of the issues that they're finding with the audits that they've done so far. And there's 4 main items that they've found that are basically lacking, or that they're finding issues with. A lot of companies don't have multi-factor authentication in place, and that's sort of like an easy, less expensive thing to do for most companies. It's not that easy, but it's certainly not very expensive, right, to roll out multi-factor authentication across your organization. It's sort of low-hanging fruit that DCMA is, that's the primary tool that people ought to be thinking about right away. Policies is an issue for a lot of people, because it's just something that nobody wants to write. Documentation, is challenging for people to sit down and do, but it needs to be done. Policies need to be written. The procedures need to be written and followed. And so that's an area that's been lacking. Exostar's got another tool called Policy Pro that we use. That's awesome for getting the policies written for your organization. I highly recommend that tool. And then another area of concern for DCMA is the lack of FIPS validation for encryption solutions. So, encrypting data at rest and movement, et cetera. There are a lot of solutions out there, but they need to have that FIPS 140-2 sort of validation. So that's been an area of concern. And then finally, sort of poorly designed or implemented network segmentation. So what that means is, a lot of networks, if you just have one sort of, flat network where all your data sits in one, spot, it's easier to manipulate and hack into that. And so you need to segment your network, maybe by certain roles or responsibilities or groups or what have you, and really lock those parts of your network down, right? Certainly, maybe segment your CUI in a specific part of your network, et cetera. So that those are areas that actually are pretty low-hanging fruit, things that you can do to improve your security right away and get forward on your POAM, if you're not already doing that. And finally, I'd say, our company, like others, right, like other MSPs, we've been doing this a long time. We've figured out some solutions that, are easier to implement, that cover the entire POAM, get you to NIST 800-171 compliance, at a lower cost. When you outsource it to a managed service provider, they generally can get it done a lot cheaper than having to hire your own internal people and tools and processes and build that out yourself. So we hear a lot that smaller firms are struggling with the idea that how much this is going to cost. I think the audit portion of that went away for a lot of companies will save them a lot of money. And then you can find, good solutions like I've listed here to get you along the path for, I think money, the costs that aren't really as burdensome as you might think. And with that, I am done with our recommendations. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Tim. So for those in the audience who'd like to reach out to Tim and or SysArc, here's their contact information. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you about how they can assist. And as Tim mentioned, they do also leverage a number of solutions that Exostar offers as well. So we're always happy to work with a great partner like SysArc. So before we kick off into the Q&A session, just want to let everybody know there is an exit poll. You'll see a link to it in the YouTube description below where you're watching this particular webinar. So we'd appreciate you filling out that exit poll. All feedback is appreciated. It'll help us tailor the next sessions to the topics that you want to cover. So we do have a special offer tied to this particular webinar. So for those who are in attendance, if you'd like to take advantage of a SysArc self-assessment, plus using the Exostar certification assistance solution, we've wrapped those up in one package with a discount off of that. Certification assistant, you'll see there the retail value, and obviously the retail value of the SysArc self-assessment as well. If you'd like to take advantage of this, please contact John Libby at exostar.com. So that's JOHN.LIBBY at exostar.com. Please contact him before January 31st to take advantage of this offer. These are the details, if you will. So as part of this offer, these are the deliverables that SysArc will bring bring as a result of their engagement with you. So you'll get that 800-171 assessment percentage compliant report. You'll get SSP and POAM recommendations report on your hardware, software, and follow-on services. And they'll let you know how you're doing, which oftentimes is of great value to everybody. And then, as I mentioned before, you'll get certification assistant with that. That allows you a chance to put in how you're doing against the NIST 800-171 standards, allows you to track your completion of those SSPs and the POAMs against those. So you can become compliant much faster and in a much cheaper method than you may be able to do it by yourself. So now I'm going to start the Q&A session. So this will be a panel discussion with both Sam and Tim. So gentlemen, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the questions that were submitted. Let's see. Sam, we'll start with you. So we got this question about, are most primes using GCC high? And if so, will they be requiring their subs to have it also?
Kevin, yes. For just about every solution that's available, we're using GCC high where it makes sense and where we believe sensitive information would be stored. Now, that's just the starting point, right? It kind of makes it easier for us to come in compliance because we know various authorizations are attached to those environments. But then we have to do our own due diligence, right? And we take those solutions and those offerings and make our own settings in it, and then process those through our own accreditation process or internal risk management framework process. So just by moving into GCC high, you're not done. So just keep that in mind. Would we tell our subs to do that as well? Well, that depends, right? Where it makes sense. Again, it's probably easier to come into compliance with an environment like GCC high, yet it's not the only way to do that, right? So you really have to make a decision and choose how you want to be able to show and defend your compliance moving out forward.
Sure, thanks. And Tim, wanted to get your opinion as well, simply because obviously you help many SMBs in kind of making that decision point on, is GCC high makes sense for my organization?
Yeah, we do. We worked with a lot of companies who are making that decision. And what I would say is, so there's two flavors of GCC. There's GCC standard and GCC high. And according to Microsoft, GCC is adequate for NIST 800-171. GCC high, if you have ITAR, is more likely a requirement that you go there. And there is a challenge with some of the functionality between GCC high and GCC and then 365 commercial. It's a difficult lift if you're going from Office 365 commercial to GCC high. It's a similar difficult lift to go to GCC, but it's less expensive. I think there's, you can pay monthly with GCC and you have to pay for the full year upfront for GCC high. So we definitely would want to talk to you about your requirements to see if you could just get away with GCC. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, thank you so much. So Sam, again, I'm going to start with you on this one because just given your background in the whole cybersecurity space. So the question is, can we get clear guidance on what is considered CUI? When do internally produced documents become CUI, and we can't secure it if we don't know what it is, if you will? So how do you look to define what CUI is?
Well, it's kind of the $1 million question, right? So it's not easy, and it depends, right? You have to work with your government customer, right? And you need their help to define what CUI is and what CUI isn't, right? Now, you can go use resources that are out there and trainings that already exist, right? Go to the NARA website and read about CUI and what makes CUI and what doesn't. And take various trainings like the new ones provided by the Department of Defense, right? So I recommend you do those trainings. Yet it's really hard to say, right? And it's customer by customer dependent on what you're making, what service, right, or you're going to provide back to the government, right? What CUI is. So again, collaborate, right, through your government customers, right, as to say, hey, clearly identify that this is CUI and something else is not, And protections will follow that data. Requirements will follow that data. And same thing if you pass information down to your suppliers, right? Clearly mark and define what CUI is, and only pass down, right, data that is needed to do the job at hand, right? So you want to minimize that flow down of CMMC, because you don't want to send more information than is required to get the job done. Which, if you pass down too much, right, then of course your protection requirements go up with that. And you want to minimize that as much as possible.
Sure, sure. Tim, anything you want to add to that?
Just one tiny thing. We generally, and again, if it's in your contract, right, that you have CUI, you need to follow the DFAR 7012. But ours, what we tell a lot of smaller companies that we work with, right, because they don't have huge networks with things all over the place, that let's just protect everything, all the data in your network, right? And you'll invariably protect CUI, your customers' data, but you also protect all of your assets. It's certainly good to know where the CUI resides and segment it. So if you do have a problem, you can inform your customer where it is and what happened if it did get touched. But in general, our philosophy is let's protect the entire network, and you'll be covered, on both sides.
Okay, fair enough. Let's see. So we actually got a question just for Exostar in here. So I'll go ahead and answer that one. It says, how does Exostar secure my company's sensitive data? So Exostar itself is a platform. It's a platform that provides both what is typically considered CIAM, or customer identity and access management. And when you talk about customer here, you talk about that broad sense of the customer. So, if you will, all your suppliers, all your partners, everyone you work with, et cetera, is a customer. All of us are very, very familiar with IAM, right? That's the typical Active Directory and those kinds of things. But when you want to start working outside of your walls, how do you ensure that organization and those individuals are okay to share with? And that's really where Exostar brings its expertise to the table. So through our platform, we provide both onboarding, and that's onboarding of the organization. So is this organization not on a denied parties list? Is this organization have the necessary recs and certs or reps and certs to go ahead and be part of my community, if you will? And then as I bring on the individuals that I want to work with in that organization, how do I ensure they are who they say they are and that they're part of that organization? So Exostar does that as part of our secure access module, where we vet those individuals. We provide secure credentials. So when people start talking about, as Tim's slide pointed out, that whether or not you have MFA is one of those gaps oftentimes that audits uncover around access to the different kinds of data. So Exostar provides that multi-factor authentication outside of your organization. It can provide those credentials and as I mentioned before, the proofing of those individuals. Those things go into then us providing access to applications, and those applications are either hosted by our customers in their secure data centers, or they're Exostar applications which we host around collaboration, typically supply chain collaboration, Windows Teams collaboration, SharePoint, etc., and putting those in those secure locations like GCC High, that then allows you to have a single solution for that external collaboration or sharing a number of different things. So that's what Exostar brings to the table in this space. And then obviously our tools like Policy Pro and Certification Assistant that allow our community of users to understand where they stand in the NIST and CMMC process. Helps them implement policies or at least document those policies that they have implemented. Do the scoring against SSPs, etc., and then create those POAM lists that you need to work to get that or to maintain your certification or to get that certification and that self-attestment or attestation, I should say. So let's see, I'll start with you on this one, Tim, because you've already talked about it a little bit, but so how can SMBs meet requirements faster and obviously, you know, and in a less expensive manner?
Right. So for us in the hundreds of people, you know, customers that we've talked to in this small and mid-size groups, you know, most times they don't have an internal cybersecurity person on staff or expert, and oftentimes they don't have their own IT departments, right? So in general, if that's the case, you're going to have to probably go outside and find, you know, a group like us or other, you know, others, you know, who do this work. And there are a lot of them, so that, you know, there are multiple sort of competitor pricing models that are out there. You know, we happen to be an MSP, and we've been that, you know, we've been one for 17 years. So we've been working with government contractors, you know, running their internal networks for them for that time frame. And so, you know, what we see, a lot of government contractors already have an MSP that they're outsourcing their network support to and, you know, management to. Those folks really should be in position to help, right? And if they're not, then, you know, you need to find an MSP that has this expertise, you know, because cyber is important to every company, whether they have compliance or not. And so if your MSP is not providing that, shame on them. But so an outsource model that has a solution, like, you know, again, there are others out there besides us that have a solution that generally is already, you know, put together, especially around NIST 800-171, that has all the tools and the processes and the resources put together for, you know, and what we're seeing is usually we can do it for the cost of about one person, right? One IT person or less for the whole thing, right? So it makes a lot of sense, as opposed to hiring your own team and doing it that way, to outsource it to a firm like ours.
Okay, fair enough. So Sam, I want to ask you another question because you know, clearly you work with a number of your subcontractors and things like that. Is there a particular checklist, reference, et cetera, that when when they come to you asking about these things that you point them to or reference to, or any, you know, kind of what's your usual go-to advice for those kinds of questions?
So first, to piggyback off of what Tim was saying. So first off, I think that there's a vast, you know, scale for small businesses, right? I mean, in size and revenue and, you know, all kinds of stuff in between, right? So, and certainly, you know, using an MSP is definitely one way to help satisfy some of the requirements. But you also have to take into account is, you know, depending on what your organization is, right? Try to keep it simple, right? Keep it as simple as possible. There are ways to come into compliance, you know, through partnering, right? You know, again, going back to, you know, sharing information with folks and finding solutions out there that make sense for your organization, whether that's, you know, using some kind of virtualization or cloud model, right? I mean, I think of, you know, as, you know, a compliance solution kind of in a box, right? Let's say a compliance solution in the cloud, right? So there's different ways to come into compliance, right? There's, you know, 100 ways to skin this cat, if you will. But check it out, you know, check out, you know, every resource possible, you know, collaborate with folks in your community, your peers. And of course, again, keep it simple, right? Because sometimes the best solution is a low-tech solution, right? To coming into compliance with some of our requirements. As for a go-to checklist or a go-to tool, don't have one, right? Even us at Raytheon Technologies, we do not use any particular tools, right, to scan or to come in compliance with various things, right? We kind of have an old school way of getting compliance, even for the vast size of our organization, right? So Excel spreadsheets and different things like that, right? So we also fit somewhat low tech when it comes to looking at compliance across the board.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
So Tim, I'm going to point this one at you. And it's so while most SMBs deal with an MSP for their IT expertise, and even those evaluations, the POAMs itself, right, and the remediation that you take when things are found, that really does fall directly on that on the SMB. What's your approach to kind of follow up and kind of knock down those POAMs with your customers?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the customer's responsible. I mean, they're responsible for the end result of their POAM and being compliant. But again, whether they're using an MSP or their own internal resources, right? And an MSP is like their internal resources, just a different way they interact, right? They're not full-time employees and they cost less, but they're using a fractional kind of service. But so again, they can roll their own solutions, right? If they have some expertise, they can knock off those POAMs one at a time, right? So when we'll do an assessment and provide a POAM for a customer, there'll be a bunch of items. Here, you have to do this item to resolve this control, right? Whether it's putting in a multi-factor or whether it's writing policies or what have you. And I think a lot of companies, they want to do it themselves, but they get stuck a lot. Somebody writing policies, they just, it gets given to somebody and they get stuck. But ultimately it's their responsibility. And so if you have an MSP or an outside consultant or a partner business that's already doing this that you can collaborate with, like Sam suggested, maybe the prime can help you figure this out and point you in the direction of getting solutions. I think having somebody, again, like an RPO, and again, there's 500 of them that have a lot of expertise around some of the solutions, some of the lower cost tools and items that will get you there in a faster, more effective way that will also make sure you're doing it properly and 100% correct. Because if you're doing it yourself, you don't really, you may not be sure, right? If you're going down the right path. I think like last year, we heard a lot of companies being told, just get on GCC and you'll be compliant, right? And to me, that, like Sam said earlier, that's part of it, but that's not cyber awareness training. That's not, it doesn't incorporate a lot of the controls. It incorporates some of them, but not all of them. So part of some of them, you want to reach out to some experts, whether they're at your prime, like, talk to Sam, if you're a Raytheon, sub, or talk to your other colleagues in the business, right?
Okay, thanks so much. So Sam, I'm going to ask this one of you because it kind of comes from your audience, if you will. So as things start to mature and CMMC, there are CMMC certifications and things like that. Do you think some of those things will replace the many, cybersecurity and compliance questionnaires that the primes request from their subs?
I hope so, right? Because, and just to clarify, right, it's not just us asking those of our subs or suppliers. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, right? They ask it of me, just the same. So I hope that in the future it's as simple as showing the certificate, right? Like, hey, I got this, know, and it's one question: do you have your certification, right? And boom, you can attach that and have your contracts person send it over. Or if you're using Exostar, right, you upload your certificate, right, and use it in many places at once.
Right. Okay, great. So Tim, I'll start with you on this one. So if we are already compliant with NIST 800-171, does this mean we are compliant with CMMC level 2?
Well, according to the DoD, when they released, CMMC 2.0, a few weeks ago, the answer to that question is yes. But until they officially release it, uh,
Yes.
9 to 24 months, I can't say yes officially, but in general, that's the action. That is a big sigh of relief for a lot of folks who went down the NIST 800-171 initially, for because of DFAR 7012. So yes, that's the great news there.
Okay. Thanks so much. And I'll throw this one to you, Sam. So can level 2 customers, obviously when it's actually a little better defined or when it's finalized, will they be able to perform a self-audit?
That's what it seems like, right? At level 2, you have that what they're calling a bifurcated level, right, for prioritized and non-prioritized acquisitions. And it seems like for non-prioritized acquisitions, that organizations could still perform a self-assessment. So that's what it seems like right now, based off of what's been written and discussed over the last little bit over a month now since CMMC 2.0 came out. I will say that, rulemaking hasn't, isn't out there right now, right? And depending on when new rules are published, and there's going to be a comment period for that, and we'll be able to, provide comments, and there could be more adjustments. So, we have to stay tuned. We've got to stay, with our, eyes wide open here, and just keep tracking the changes.
Yeah, and Tim, I think in our pre-talk, if you will, you had mentioned something else about really kind of where the sign-off occurs that I thought was important to bring up.
Yeah. So if you're in that portion of level 2 that doesn't, that self-attestation, it's the owner or CEO or officer of the company that has to sign the attestation, and that leaves them open to other liability issues if they don't do that in good faith, or if it's not accurate. So either way, right? If you're at level 2, you're at NIST 800-171, whether you're going to be audited or not, just get there, as soon as you can. You'll be more secure. And, the ones who are going to have to go through an audit, they'll probably be, in those programs that are, you're going to, charge more for your services anyway. And the additional cost would just be the audit process. So it's probably a wash. And again, I think they're doing that. I think that they do. There's probably going to be somewhere between 20 to 40,000 companies if they didn't bifurcate it. And again, they just can't get to all those companies. You can't audit all those companies in a timely fashion, right? So they know they have to split it out. But again, the problem doesn't go away. The cybersecurity arena is just getting worse, as Sam said right from the start. So I think what they're doing is asking industry to sort of just step up and they're giving them breaks on audits, but let's get our organization secure for the benefit of the DoD, but also for the industry benefit.
Yep. Great. Thanks so much. So Sam, this came up actually in another webinar that I was doing last week. And so I'll ask it of you. So when Raytheon's looking at a sub, and they submit their SPURS, or they share with you their SPURS scores, are there certain thresholds for certain things that you take a look at?
Not at the current moment, right? So really, there is no requirement to share your SPURS score with your prime, right? That goes into the SPURS database, right, and only the government.
Good point.
That, right? So there's no obligation that I'm aware of, right, that organization has to share their score with me. But more to the point of the question, right? We don't ask for their score, right? There's various criteria that we look at for suppliers based off of quality, right? Different certifications that we ask for, that we want, but we ask the questions about cybersecurity, right? Where they are in their compliance march with 1.0, CMMC 1.0. We were asking the question, you know, what goal they had, right? Where do they see themselves in that model, right? What was 1 through 5, but we don't do that anymore, right? Because obviously it's changed, and we're pausing a little bit and asking those CMMC questions down the road. So, but overall, I don't have a clipping level, if you will, for
Okay.
our software, and I haven't seen the DoD have one either, right? Now, overall, I do know, or I'm aware of, some fairly low scores out there across the industry, and I haven't seen the government stop awarding federal modifications or awards because of low scores in spurs.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
Okay. Tim, anything you want to add on that one?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Yep. That was really directed at a prime, because it seemed to be addressed to that. So I appreciate those answers. Yep. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to us at cmmc-team@exostar.com. We do have a ton of useful information available from our website. Also, as you replay this webinar, feel free to click on these if you need some additional information. This includes links to our 2 products, Certification and Assistant and Policy Pro, which help get you, started, if you will, down this journey, lets you track your progress along it as well, and will, if you will, jumpstart that effort to complete the NIST 800-171, and then clearly the follow-on requirements around CMMC as well. Just a reminder, please fill out that exit poll, and I want to thank everyone for their time and attention today. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to us. Tim, Sam, thanks so much for your time today and for taking all this time with our community. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you.